Welcome to Robraintics, where we discuss recent research advancements in the field of neuroscience and robotics. Welcome to Robraintics, everybody. We are diving deep today, folks, into a study about how our brains, get this, how our brains turn what we see into, actions, especially when we're making decisions.
Sounds familiar.
Right, like every day.
Yeah.
We're looking at some really cool research by Khilkevich and their team over at University College London,
Okay.
published in Nature. And get this, they used a mouse model. But here's the kicker. They mapped the activity of over 15,000 neurons
Wow.
across 51 brain regions.
That's a lot of data.
It is a lot of brain power, that's for sure. And to help us really kind of break this down, all this intricate neural activity, we've got our expert here.
It's really mind-boggling when you think about it, like all the decisions that we make every day, from just, what we're going to eat to some really big life choices.
Right.
And this research is kind of giving us like a sneak peek into this amazing system that we've got going on up there.
I love that. So let's break it down. What exactly were these mice doing? And how does it relate to our decision-making?
Well, so the researchers, they designed this really smart task that kind of forced the mice to make decisions, based on what they were seeing. They were looking at this, what was a pattern on a screen? You could think of it like a barcode.
Okay.
Kind of a stripy barcode that was like drifting.
Gotcha.
And the mice had to figure out if and when that pattern changed speed.
Oh, so that's the decision.
The decision they had to make.
That sounds kind of straightforward.
Yeah.
How did they signal their decision? Did they raise a little flag or something?
Well, here's the thing. They couldn't just press a button or, wave a flag. To show they'd noticed the change in speed, they had to lick, like a little reward spout.
Okay, like a water bottle.
Yeah, like a little water spout.
Gotcha.
And these weren't super obvious changes either.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were really subtle and unpredictable. They varied in size. So the mice had to really pay attention and kind of integrate all this information over time.
So they couldn't just react to a flashing light or a loud sound. They had to analyze a continuous stream of information.
Yeah.
Okay, and then decide what to do.
Exactly. So by designing the task like this, the researchers could actually tell the difference between the brain activity related to just seeing the pattern versus the activity involved in planning that action, the lick.
Okay, so they isolated the decision from the action. That's super cool. What did they see when they look at all those neurons firing away?
Okay, so one of the first things that really stood out was that almost every brain region they looked at, and remember we're talking 51 regions, right? Almost every region showed some kind of response to the visual information. So it was a truly distributed process, engaging this massive network of brain areas.
Whoa. So does that mean our whole brain's lighting up like a Christmas tree every time we make, even a small decision?
Not exactly. While a lot of regions were active, it doesn't mean every single neuron was, going crazy.
Right.
It's not a full-blown brain-wide party. It's more specific groups of neurons within each region. And we call these sparse populations.
Sparse populations.
Yeah, and they're the ones handling the information.
Oh, okay. So it's more like targeted activation, like specialist teams within a big organization working on a project.
Exactly. And the way these neural responses changed as they moved through the brain was fascinating. So in the early sensory areas, the visual cortex, right? The activity was really quick.
Right.
And transient, almost like a burst of energy.
That makes sense. Those areas are all about processing that raw visual input. But then what happens?
Well, as that information gets passed on to areas that are more involved in, planning movements, like the frontal cortex, the thalamus, basal ganglia, even the cerebellum, the responses become way more sustained.
Interesting.
It's like holding a musical note, than just playing a quick beat.
Oh, I like that. So it's like a relay race where the baton, which is the visual information, is passed from runner to runner. And each runner holds onto it a bit longer as it gets closer to the finish line, which is the decision to lick.
Yeah, that's a great way to picture it. And here's where things get even more interesting. All those regions that showed this sustained activity, well, they're also known to be involved in planning and coordinating movements. So this suggests that as our brain is processing what it's seeing, it's simultaneously preparing for potential actions, based on that information.
Wow. It's my brain's already thinking, okay, if this pattern speeds up, I got to be ready to lick and get that reward. But how does it stop itself from, acting too soon?
That's a great question. And it brings us to one of the most remarkable findings of this whole study. It's this concept of a movement null subspace, which is essentially a pattern of neural activity that prepares the brain for movement. But without actually triggering it, it's like, like a coiled spring, storing energy, ready to be released, but just holding back until the right moment. It's like the brain is getting ready to act, but it's showing restraint, until it's absolutely sure.
Wow, I'm starting to see how amazing this mechanism is. It's like my brain is running like a simulation,
Mhm.
Getting ready for different things that could happen, but not actually committing to anything
Yeah.
until it's got enough information.
Exactly. And get this, the same neurons that are responsible for putting together all that visual evidence, like figuring out if that pattern is really changing speed, those are the same neurons that are driving the activity in this movement null subspace.
So it's not like one part of the brain is gathering information and then another part is planning the action. It's like all happening together. It's all linked.
Exactly. And this integration is crucial for preventing, impulsive actions. The brain avoids jumping the gun by keeping the evidence gathering part separate from the action preparation part until it hits a certain threshold, a decision threshold.
Man, this is giving me a whole new level of respect for my brain.
Yeah.
It's not just reacting like on autopilot. It's carefully weighing evidence, planning my moves. It's like a chess master up there.
It really is.
Yeah.
But I gotta ask, if our brains are so good at this, why do we sometimes make those impulsive split-second decisions that we end up regretting later? Like grabbing that extra donut, even though we know we shouldn't.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like the classic donut dilemma.
Exactly. So, while this research sheds light on like a really key decision-making mechanism, there are definitely other factors at play as well.
Right.
Our brains are incredibly complex, and sometimes, emotions or cravings or social pressures can kind of override those carefully calculated decisions.
All right, so even though my brain might be saying, hold on, let's think this through, my emotional brain, the one that's driven by that donut craving, wins out, at least in the moment. It's like a battle going on in my head.
You could definitely think of it that way. Different brain systems are constantly interacting. And sometimes those more impulsive, instinctual drives, they take the lead. But here's where it gets even more interesting. This research also found that our brains aren't stuck with like a fixed decision-making speed. The timescale for integrating information and making a choice can actually be influenced by learning.
Wait, hold on. So you're saying we can actually train our brains to become more deliberate decision makers? Is there like a class for that I need to sign up for?
Well, the researchers found that the mice who'd been trained on this task, the ones that knew they'd get a reward for correctly spotting the speed change, they became much better at integrating the visual information over time compared to mice who just got like random rewards.
Oh, interesting. So the mice who were learning and adapting to the task, they were basically sharpening their decision-making skills. Their brains were getting better at processing information and preparing for the right action. That's pretty encouraging.
It really is. It suggests that the way our brains make decisions, it's not just set in stone by biology. It's shaped by our experiences. And what we learn, the more we practice something, the better we get at recognizing patterns, anticipating outcomes, and making those informed choices.
That is mind-blowing. It's like our brains are constantly evolving, adapting to the challenges we face, and getting better at making decisions. But there's so much more to unpack here. Wow. It's amazing to think that we're not just stuck with, like, whatever decision-making skills we're born with.
Right. It really changes how we think about things. We can actually, like, train our brains to get better at it. Like, you're not just reacting to the world, you're shaping how you respond to it through experience and through learning.
So let's go back to, like, some of the big things that we've been talking about this whole, like, neural dance, as we've been calling it. So we started by talking about how visual information is processed across a whole network of brain regions. It's not just the visual cortex, right? It's also areas involved in planning movement, like the frontal cortex, basal ganglia, cerebellum.
Yeah, and it's not like these regions, they don't just like see the information and forget about it. They actually hold on to it and integrate it over time, which is super important for making good judgments because let's face it, the world is rarely black and white.
Yeah, it's all about careful thinking, weighing the evidence before actually, making a move. And the movement null subspace, that idea just blew my mind. It's like our brains are running simulations, getting ready for different things that could happen, but not actually doing anything until it's time.
Exactly. And we saw how those same neurons that are processing the sensory information are also involved in getting ready for action. So like the whole decision-making system is all connected.
Man, our brains are so sophisticated, constantly gathering information, figuring out what to do, and then strategizing our next move. And the fact that we can actually get better at it by practicing, by learning, that's really empowering.
It is. It means we can actively work on becoming better decision makers, whether it's by practicing mindfulness to manage those impulsive urges, or by putting ourselves in situations that make us think critically and weigh our options carefully.
This has been an incredible deep dive. It makes you really appreciate, all the stuff that's happening in your head every time you make even a small decision.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to learn about how our brains work, what affects our choices, and how we can, use the power of our brains to become even better thinkers.
If you want to learn even more about this research, be sure to check out the original Nature paper by Khilkevich and their team. And for more amazing deep dives into the world of neuroscience, subscribe to Robraintics.